honestly don't even know where to start. What happened that Saturday still replays in my head like a blurry, poorly edited memory, the kind you don't know if you dreamed or lived. It was supposed to be a simple day, just one of those clear, sunny spring mornings in Brighton. Blue skies, bird song, and the smell of fresh air that makes you want to get out of the house. Oliver, a 38-year-old widower and father of one, had no idea how different that day would end up. He just wanted to do something normal with Emma, his 5-year-old daughter. For once, no work calls, no therapy appointments, no reminders of how much had changed since his wife, Laura, passed away 2 years ago. Emma had been excited since breakfast, bouncing around the house, clutching her stuffed rabbit, Charlie, like it was the most important thing in her world. And in some way, it was. Since Laura died, Emma became Oliver's anchor, his entire world compressed into this tiny, curious, bright-eyed girl. They hadn't gone out, just the two of them, in months, so when Oliver spotted this little local cafe they always drove past but never entered, he figured it was as good a place as any. A few wooden tables outside, flowers in old glass jars, and the smell of homemade food drifting down the pavement. He parked the car and Emma practically dragged him inside by the hand. The bell over the door jingled softly as they entered. For a second it all felt peaceful, that fragile kind of peace you don't trust. Then Emma tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, that lady looks like Mummy." He chuckled, expecting another odd comparison. Kids say all sorts of things. But when he turned to look, the world stopped cold. She was standing near the back of the cafe, scribbling something onto a notepad, completely unaware of the storm she had just triggered in someone's chest. Her name tag read Anna, but to Oliver, it didn't matter what her name was. Her face, God, her face, was Laura's. Exactly. Laura's. Not in the vague, reminds me of someone way. No. It was like she had been lifted from the photographs on his bedroom wall and placed here, alive, breathing, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear with that same motion Laura used to make when she was nervous. Oliver couldn't breathe properly. His stomach twisted. He gripped Emma's hand so tightly she glanced up at him, confused. What do you do when a ghost walks into your life without knowing they're a ghost? Anna didn't see them, or if she did, she gave no sign. She moved from table to table, speaking to customers, taking orders, laughing at something someone said. Her voice didn't carry far, but even the tone was familiar, warm, soft, the kind of voice that wraps around you like a blanket. Oliver blinked several times, trying to snap out of it, telling himself it was grief, his mind playing cruel tricks. It had happened before, the brain trying to fill in gaps, to comfort itself with illusions, but this wasn't a shadow in a crowd. She was real as the chair he sat in. The sounds around him blurred, forks clinking, a baby crying, someone talking loudly about football. Everything became background noise to this impossible thing happening right in front of him. And Emma had seen her too. Kids don't lie about things like this. Not this way. Oliver didn't know whether to run, cry, or stay rooted to the spot. But one thing was clear. He couldn't unsee her. Oliver's first instinct was to get out of there. Not in a dramatic storming out kind of way. More like his body suddenly remembered it had somewhere else to be. Anywhere else but here. But his legs didn't move. He couldn't. There was this invisible thread pulling his attention back to her, to Anna. His chest tightened with each breath, and for a second he genuinely wondered if he might be having a panic attack. He looked down at Emma, now busy unfolding a paper napkin and folding it again like nothing had happened. She'd seen the woman too. That much was clear. She had said it, not as a joke or a childish misunderstanding, but with the calm conviction only kids seem to manage when they blurt out something that floors you. That's what scared him the most. Emma wouldn't invent something like that. And she had never, ever confused anyone else for Laura. Not once. The idea of asking Anna directly, walking up and saying, "You look exactly like my dead wife," was obviously off the table. He wasn't insane, but he needed to leave. Think, breathe, just get his bearings. Without saying a word, he pulled his wallet from his back pocket and placed a few bills under the salt shaker. Then he scooped Emma into his arms, her little legs dangling as she wrapped her arms around his neck. She whined softly. "But we didn't eat yet." He kissed her temple and said, "Let's go somewhere else, sweetheart." Outside, the air felt heavier somehow, like everything had shifted just slightly off its axis. He put Emma into her booster seat, buckled her in, and sat in the front seat staring at the steering wheel. Nothing made sense. Was he losing it? Was this grief? Or had something, or someone, just pulled the past right into his present? He didn't drive straight home. That would have made sense, and nothing about this felt logical anymore. Instead, his hands guided the car through quiet neighborhood streets without any real destination. He passed rows of terraced houses, little gardens blooming with tulips, and children playing on scooters, and yet none of it registered. His mind kept circling the same image. Anna's face, her expression, the rhythm of her movements, all of it so painfully familiar. He felt like he'd just escaped a dream that didn't want to let go. Emma was quiet in the back seat, staring out the window, Charlie the rabbit tucked under her arm. That silence from her was unusual. She was usually humming, asking questions, or narrating long, made-up stories about imaginary creatures. But today, she was quiet. And Oliver knew that meant she felt it too. The strange tension in the air, the heaviness in his chest. Finally, almost without realizing it, he pulled up outside Preston Park, one of the places he and Laura used to walk before Emma was born. Back then, it had been their little ritual. Coffee in hand, strolling past the rose garden, or watching dogs chase each other on the open lawn. It was the only place he could think of where his head might calm down. He parked, got out, and lifted Emma from the car. She wrapped her arms around his neck again, wordlessly, and that broke him a little. They found a bench under one of the old chestnut trees. The breeze moved gently through the leaves, and Emma sat on his lap, quietly fiddling with the edge of his sleeve. Oliver wanted to pretend things were okay, but his daughter looked up at him with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 5-year-old. "Daddy, are you sad?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "I'm just thinking, love," he said. Just thinking. They sat there for a long time, neither of them saying much. Every now and then, a jogger passed by or a dog barked in the distance, but none of it seemed to touch the quiet bubble forming around them. Emma leaned her head against Oliver's shoulder, which she rarely did unless she sensed he was upset. That was the thing about her. She was a sensitive kid, the kind who noticed everything even when you thought she wasn't paying attention. Oliver stared out at the open field in front of them, but his mind was replaying everything that had just happened in the cafe. He tried to recall details about Anna that went beyond her resemblance to Laura. Had there been differences? Was her voice really the same? Or had his brain filled in the blanks? Was her posture slightly different? Her smile a bit more guarded? He couldn't say for sure, but it didn't matter. Not when every cell in his body had reacted like it had seen a ghost. The logical part of him, the part that had sat through hours of therapy, whispered that it could be a coincidence. Maybe she was a distant cousin of Laura's, or just someone with similar features. But the part of him that still kept Laura's scarf folded in his drawer, that still checked her old voicemail just to hear her voice, wasn't so sure. That part of him said, no, this wasn't random. This meant something. Emma broke the silence by picking up a daisy from the ground and handing it to him. "Here, for your pocket," she said. He took it and smiled, even though his heart felt like it was in pieces. He didn't know what this day had just started, but deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep curled up with Charlie and a worn picture book about space, Oliver sat alone in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea he hadn't taken a sip of. The house was still, save for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. He'd left all the lights off except for the one above the sink. The soft yellow glow did little to brighten the thoughts running through his head. He kept seeing her face, Anna's, but in flashes. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the slight dip in her chin when she smiled, the curve of her back as she leaned forward to take a customer's order. It was Laura, down to the details you couldn't make up. He didn't know what was worse. The fact that someone out there looked so uncannily like his dead wife, or the fact that he couldn't stop thinking about her now. He pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the screen for a long time. Eventually he opened his contacts and scrolled until he found James, his friend, and more importantly, the closest thing he had to someone who still operated in the real world. James had been a private investigator before settling into a quieter life, fixing up old homes. If anyone could discreetly find out who Anna was, it was him. Oliver typed out a short message. Need your help. Urgent, but sensitive. Call when you can." Then he set the phone down and leaned back in the chair, letting his eyes close for a moment. His chest felt tight, the kind of pressure that didn't come from anxiety alone. Whatever today had been, it was only the beginning. Something told him the past wasn't done with him yet. James called back first thing the next morning, even before Emma was awake. His voice still had that gravelly edge of someone who hadn't had coffee yet, but the second he heard the tone in Oliver's voice, he switched gears. "You're serious about this?" he asked, after listening quietly for a minute or two. Oliver wasn't sure what he expected. Laughter, disbelief, maybe even a bit of concern for his mental state, but James gave him none of that. "Send me the name of the place. I'll see what I can dig up," he said. And just like that, the gears started turning. Oliver walked to the window and watched the gray morning light spill across the garden, damp from the previous night's drizzle. He could hear the faint hum of cartoons from Emma's room upstairs, and something about the contrast of it all made him feel oddly detached from his own life. He messaged James the cafe's name, location, and even the approximate time they were there yesterday. Then he added one more thing. "She goes by Anna. That's all I know." He hesitated before hitting send, but deep down, he knew there was no turning back now. Whether it ended up being a wild coincidence or something far more complex, he needed answers. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine while this mystery lingered at the back of his mind like a song stuck on repeat. After sending the message, he made breakfast for Emma, toast with strawberry jam and a banana cut into stars. She ate happily, feet swinging under the table, asking if they could go back to the park later. Oliver nodded, smiling, but the truth was, his mind wasn't in that kitchen anymore. It was still back at the cafe, staring at a face that shouldn't exist. By mid-afternoon, Oliver couldn't help himself. He found a spot on the opposite side of the street from the cafe, parked the car, and sat with the windows cracked, trying not to feel like a stalker. He wasn't there to confront her. He just needed to see her again, confirm that he hadn't imagined it. Brighton city center buzzed with its usual charm. Students laughing outside bookstores, street performers singing with open guitar cases, cyclists weaving between cars. But none of it reached him. His eyes stayed glued to the cafe. After about 10 minutes, the back door opened, and there she was. Anna stepped out with her hair pulled into a loose bun, carrying 2 crates of supplies. She balanced them with ease, adjusted the knot of her apron, and disappeared inside again. It was her, no question. Seeing her now, when he wasn't caught off guard, gave him a strange kind of clarity. She didn't just look like Laura, she moved like her. There was a rhythm to the way she walked, a softness in how she interacted with others. He watched through the cafe's large windows as she laughed with a customer, wiped down a table, bent down to speak to a child. The resemblance was more than physical. It was in the gestures, the way she tilted her head, the way she seemed to actually listen to people. Oliver's throat tightened. He pulled out his phone and snapped a few discreet photos through the windshield. Not for proof necessarily, more like insurance. Something to show James, to remind himself that this wasn't just grief playing tricks. He stayed there for almost an hour, just watching, and the longer he sat, the stronger the pull became. He didn't know who Anna was, but he knew now with absolute certainty. This wasn't a coincidence. James messaged just after 6 in the evening. Oliver was in the middle of folding laundry on the living room floor, half watching a children's baking show with Emma when his phone vibrated. The message was brief. "Got some things. Meet me?" That was all he needed. He left Emma with Sophie, the babysitter who stayed with her 2 evenings a week, and drove across town to the little cafe where James usually camped out with his laptop. James was already there, sipping a black coffee and tapping at the screen like he'd been doing this since morning. When Oliver walked in, James didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were a few printed documents, screenshots, and scribbled notes. Her name is Anna Bennett. She's been working at that cafe for about 3 years. Lives in a shared house off Ditchling Road, nothing fancy. Before that, just odd jobs, cleaning, waitressing, retail. I can't find anything on her before the age of 5. Oliver blinked. "What do you mean, nothing?" James leaned back in his chair. "I mean no records, no birth certificate, no GP registrations, no school records. It's like she didn't exist until she was 5 years old." Oliver felt the air shift. The background noise of the cafe, the hiss of milk steamers, a dog barking outside, seemed to fade into the background. James kept going, his voice low. She was placed into care when she was 5. They don't even know who brought her in. No note, no family. Just dropped off. She told them her name was Anna. They guessed the rest. Oliver sat back, the weight of the folder in his hands suddenly overwhelming. "She's an orphan?" he asked quietly. James nodded. "Looks like it. But there's something else." The care home staff said she was different, polite, well-spoken, like she came from somewhere better, somewhere safe. Oliver didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay in bed, the folder James had given him spread out across the duvet, and read every line, every name, every date again and again. Anna Bennett. That name was going to haunt him now. A girl who appeared out of nowhere at age 5, alone, scared, no one to claim her. It was all too much to be a coincidence. Not just her face, but her entire backstory felt like a piece of a puzzle that had been missing from his life. He thought about Laura, about their late-night conversations when they'd first started dating, her laughing about how small her family was. She'd never mentioned a sister, certainly not a twin. But now Oliver couldn't help but wonder, what if Laura herself didn't know? What if Anna had been taken, lost, before anyone even had time to remember her properly? He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. The grief he thought he'd buried was crawling back with new questions. It wasn't just about wanting to know who Anna was anymore. It was about needing to. He thought of Emma, sleeping just down the hall. What if Anna was family? What if this woman, this stranger who looked exactly like his wife, shared the same blood as his daughter? There was too much at stake now. Oliver reached for his phone again and scrolled through the photos he'd taken of Anna earlier that day. Her smile, the way she crouched to tie a child's shoe. It didn't feel like watching a stranger. It felt like watching someone he already knew. He didn't want to believe in fate, but something was happening, and it was bigger than him, bigger than all of them. He didn't know what came next, but he knew he couldn't walk away now. 2 days passed before Oliver returned to the cafe. He had told himself he wouldn't go back. Not yet, but the pull was too strong. There was something unfinished there, a question that refused to let him move on. He didn't want to confront her. He wasn't even sure what he'd say if he did, but part of him needed to see her again. Not through a car window, not in secret, in person. So he waited until just after lunch, when the crowd thinned out and the cafe got quieter, then walked in like he was just another customer. The bell above the door gave that same soft jingle, and he almost expected everything to collapse around him when he saw her behind the counter. But it didn't. She looked up, saw him, and smiled, politely, like she did with everyone. "Table for one?" she asked, grabbing a menu from the stack. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm, familiar, but no flicker of recognition. Not a pause, not a shift in her expression, just kindness. Oliver nodded, trying to keep his own voice from cracking. "Yeah, just one." She led him to a table near the window, the same one he and Emma had sat at days earlier, and handed him the menu. "Let me know if you have any questions," she said, and walked back toward the counter. He watched her go, heart pounding. Sitting there, he had 1,000 thoughts racing through his mind, but none of them forming sentences. He wasn't crazy, she was real, and he was here. Minutes later, she returned to take his order, recommending the house lasagna with a soft smile. He said yes to everything, not because he was hungry, but because the sound of her voice made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. He needed to stay. As she walked away to place his order, Oliver found himself watching every detail. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the rhythm of her footsteps, how she gently patted an elderly man's shoulder when she laughed at something he said. It was uncanny, not just the resemblance, but the warmth, the energy. Laura had been like that too, always present, always making people feel seen. It was as if Anna carried the same light, and that's what made it harder. If she had just looked like Laura, maybe he could have chalked it up to genetics or a bizarre twist of fate. But it wasn't just her face, it was something deeper. And yet, she didn't know. That much was clear. She treated him like a stranger, with kindness, yes, but no spark of recognition, no flicker of memory. That made his stomach twist even more. He couldn't just ask, couldn't just say, Did you know you might be someone else entirely? That would break her. Hell, it was already breaking him. Still, he couldn't sit there and say nothing. So when she came back with his food, he tried the most casual question he could muster. So, have you worked here long? Anna smiled, resting the plate in front of him. Going on 3 years now. It's a nice place. The owner can be a bit moody, but it's steady work. I like it. Oliver nodded, pretending to care about the lasagna. Always lived around here? He added. She shook her head. Not really. Moved around a bit when I was younger. I don't remember much. Before I was 5, I was in care. She said it so casually, like it was just a fact about her, not something life-altering. Oliver's fork paused mid-air. That was it. Confirmation. He wasn't imagining anything. She really didn't know who she was. Oliver barely touched his food. He pushed the lasagna around the plate, nodding here and there as Anna spoke, but his mind was miles away. The moment she said she didn't remember anything before age 5, something shifted in him. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It couldn't be. That was exactly the age where Anna's records began. The same age James had mentioned when he said she appeared in the system. And now here she was, casually confirming it like it meant nothing, like it wasn't the missing link in a chain of impossible truths. When she walked away to check on another table, he pulled out his phone and sent James a quick message. You were right. She doesn't remember her early childhood. She said it herself. Then he locked the screen and sat back, watching her from a distance. She was talking to a group of teenagers now, laughing at something one of them said, completely unaware of the storm unraveling just a few meters away. That's what struck him most. The ease with which she moved through life, unaware of her past, of the identity that might have been stolen from her. Oliver couldn't decide if it was a gift or a curse. Maybe she was better off not knowing. Maybe all this would only hurt her. But then he thought of Emma, of how much she'd lost, how much she deserved to know if she had a connection to this woman. And Oliver, he couldn't deny it anymore. He wanted to protect Anna, not just because she looked like Laura, but because something in her presence felt necessary, like finding a part of yourself you didn't know was missing. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was tied to his story, and there was no going back now. As he stood to leave, Anna caught his eye and smiled warmly. Hope you enjoyed it, she said. Oliver forced a smile and nodded, replying, I did. Thanks. It felt inadequate, like thanking someone for handing you a coffee when they'd unknowingly just reopened a wound you thought had healed. He paid and stepped outside, letting the door shut behind him with a soft jingle. The afternoon air was cooler now, a breeze picking up off the sea and rustling the leaves in the trees nearby. He stood on the pavement for a few seconds, unsure what to do next. Every instinct told him to get in the car and drive straight to James's flat, to plan the next steps, to find the missing pieces of Anna's life. But another part of him, the part that had stayed quiet for years, the part that had known real love and real loss, told him to pause, to think. He couldn't just drop this on her, couldn't march in and say, hey, your entire life is a lie, and you might be the twin sister of my dead wife. That wasn't how people lived through things. That was how people broke. So, instead, he walked. He didn't know where he was going. Just let his feet take him down narrow Brighton streets, past bakeries closing for the day, kids finishing after-school clubs, cyclists weaving through traffic. Everything looked normal, but inside him, nothing was. By the time he made it home, the sky had started turning that soft pink-orange it does just before sunset. Emma was on the floor in her pajamas, building a spaceship out of blocks. She looked up when he entered and beamed. Daddy, I made a moon lander. He smiled back, but his heart was heavy. Somewhere out there, another life was orbiting theirs, and soon it was going to collide. The following morning, Oliver knew he had to tell James everything he'd learned from Anna, and more importantly, ask him for one last favor. After dropping Emma off at school, he drove straight to James's flat, a modest 2-bedroom above an old bakery that always smelled of warm dough and burnt sugar. James greeted him at the door, with a mug of coffee and a raised eyebrow. You look like hell, he said, motioning him inside. Oliver didn't waste time. He laid everything out. What Anna said, how she had no memory before 5, the way she talked, moved, smiled. It's not just in my head. he said, voice low, eyes tired. It's her. I know it's her. James listened in silence, arms crossed, his expression shifting slowly from curiosity to concern. When Oliver finally finished, James took a sip of his coffee and sighed. You want a DNA test, he said flatly. Oliver nodded. I don't want to confront her, not yet, but I need to know. For Emma, for myself. James stared at him for a few seconds, then nodded. Okay, we can do that, but you'll need something she's used. A fork, a cup, a napkin, anything with her DNA on it. Oliver swallowed hard. I think I can manage that. It felt wrong, invasive, but not more wrong than keeping a possible truth hidden forever. If there was even a chance that Anna was Laura's twin and Emma's aunt, he had a responsibility to find out. James scribbled a name and address on a notepad and handed it over. Discreet lab, no questions asked. Oliver pocketed it, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the possibility that the test would prove him right, or that it wouldn't. Later that day, Oliver returned to the cafe, this time with a plan. He didn't stay long, just long enough to order a coffee to go and sit briefly at the counter while Anna prepared it. She greeted him with the same warmth, the same easy smile. Back again? She asked. He chuckled nervously. Yeah, hard to resist the coffee here. She slid the cup toward him, and for a split second, their fingers brushed. A spark ran through him, not romantic, not electric in that way, but something deeper. Recognition, familiarity, pain. You want a lid? She asked. No, I'll just take it like this, he replied and stood quickly. She smiled and wished him a good day, then turned to help the next customer. Oliver left, coffee in hand, heart racing. The moment he stepped outside, he pulled a plastic evidence bag from his coat pocket, the kind James had given him, and carefully slipped the cup inside. He zipped it up, tucked it away, and walked briskly to his car. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad detective drama, but the stakes were real. This wasn't about playing spy. It was about finally putting years of confusion, grief, and unanswered questions to rest. He drove straight to the address James had given him, a nondescript lab on the outskirts of town, tucked between a car repair shop and a veterinary clinic. No signs, no receptionist, just a bell and a buzzer. He handed over the bag without saying much. The technician barely looked at him. We'll call, she said. Oliver nodded and walked back to his car, hands trembling. It was done. Now all he could do was wait. And in that waiting, the weight of everything. Of Laura, of Anna, of the possibility that life had played a cruel trick, bore down on him like never before. The waiting was the hardest part. Days passed, and every hour felt like it stretched into something heavier, thicker. Oliver tried to carry on like everything was normal. He went to work. He packed Emma's lunches. He sat through meetings and helped her with spelling homework. But beneath it all was this constant hum, like a low-frequency signal only he could hear, reminding him that the truth was out there now, sealed in a lab, being decoded. He kept checking his phone obsessively. Every time it buzzed, his heart leapt, then sank when it was just a promotional email or a message from school. He didn't tell anyone, not even Sophie, the babysitter, who had noticed how distracted he'd been and offered to stay longer a few nights. He didn't want to explain, didn't want to say the words out loud before he had something concrete. But Emma, she sensed something. She always did. One evening, while they were building a Lego castle, together on the living room rug, she paused, looked at him with those same eyes Laura used to have, and said, "You're thinking a lot again." Oliver smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess I am." She tilted her head. "Is it about the lady from the cafe?" He froze. She hadn't mentioned her since that day. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" he said gently. Emma shrugged. "Because you get quiet when you think about her. Like when you used to look at Mummy's pictures." He didn't know what to say to that. She went back to her Legos like it was nothing, but Oliver sat there stunned. Kids don't understand everything, but they feel everything. Emma wasn't wrong, and her noticing it made him even more certain. This wasn't something he could leave buried. Whatever the test said, he would face it. When the call finally came, Oliver was parked outside Emma's school, waiting for dismissal. It was a Thursday, and the sky was that dull gray that never quite turns to rain. The number was unfamiliar, but his gut told, it was the lab. He answered on the first ring, voice tight. "Mr. Cooper?" a woman said, professional and clipped. "We have your results." He held his breath. "There is a strong familial match. Very strong. The DNA sample you submitted has an extremely high probability of being from a close biological relative to the late Laura Cooper. Based on the markers, we would classify the subject as an identical twin." Oliver didn't speak. Couldn't. His body went cold. The woman continued, reading off disclaimers about limitations, probability percentages, and consent forms, but he wasn't listening anymore. Identical twin. That was it. The words rang in his head over and over like bells tolling the end of everything he thought he knew. Anna wasn't just a look-alike. She was Laura's sister, her twin, lost, separated, forgotten by the world, and somehow dropped into his life like fate had grown impatient. He thanked the woman, barely remembering to hang up, and sat in the car with both hands on, the steering wheel staring straight ahead. Kids began pouring out of the school gates in colorful coats and backpacks, shouting and laughing, but he heard none of it. Emma ran up to the car, pulled the door open, and climbed into her seat in the back, rambling about art class and a boy who spilled juice on his shirt. Oliver smiled, nodding, but his mind was burning. He couldn't hold on to this secret anymore. Not from Anna, not from Emma. He didn't know how he'd tell her, but he knew he had to. The truth was no longer optional. That night Oliver couldn't sleep. The truth sat like a stone in his chest, pressing harder with every passing hour. He stood in the hallway outside Emma's room for a long time, just watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, curled around Charlie, her tiny hands twitching in whatever dream she was having. It was both comforting and devastating. How could he explain this to her? That the woman she saw for a fleeting moment in a cafe, the one who looked like Mummy, wasn't just a stranger, but her aunt, a blood connection neither of them had known existed. He imagined what Laura would say if she were here. Would she believe it? Would she be angry that he pursued it? Or would she have done the same? There were so many gaps in Laura's own past. She never talked about her early childhood much. Only vague mentions of foster homes and moving a lot. No siblings. No real memories before 6. At the time, it hadn't seemed odd. People block things out. Trauma buries itself. But now, looking back, it felt like the signs had always been there. They just didn't know how to read them. He walked to the kitchen, made himself a cup of tea he never drank, and stared out the window into the night. Anna was out there, living her life, unaware of everything that had just shifted beneath her feet. She didn't ask for this. She didn't deserve to have her world shaken up. But wasn't it worse to let her keep living in a lie? Oliver felt torn in every direction. As a father, as a widower, as a man holding a truth that didn't belong solely to him. He knew he couldn't keep it to himself, but finding the right way to share it, that was a different battle entirely. The next day, Oliver waited until late afternoon before walking into the cafe again. He'd rehearsed a dozen versions of what he might say. Gentle approaches, direct confessions, even absurd attempts at small talk that might lead to deeper things. None of it felt right. But there she was, standing behind the counter, laughing with a colleague, wiping her hands on a tea towel. Alive, unaware, unchanged. For a moment, he almost turned and left, but then she looked up and saw him, and her face lit up in recognition. "Hey, you're becoming a regular," she joked, stepping toward him. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked, and something in his tone must have shifted her mood, because her expression grew serious instantly. "Sure," she said. "Back here?" She led him to a small hallway near the staff room where the noise of the cafe dimmed behind them. Oliver leaned against the wall, rubbing his palms together. "This is going to sound crazy," he started, his voice low and shaky. "But I need you to hear me out." Anna folded her arms but nodded. "Okay." He took a breath. "Do you know anyone named Laura Cooper?" Her brow furrowed. "No." "Should I?" He swallowed. "She was my wife. She died 2 years ago." Anna blinked, lips parting slightly, confused. "I'm sorry. I don't understand." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo, the one he kept in his wallet. It was Laura and Emma, smiling on a bench in Preston Park. He handed it to Anna. She took one look and gasped. "That's..." She stopped herself. "That's me." Her voice cracked. "But I don't remember this." Oliver nodded slowly. "Because it's not you. It's your twin sister." For a few seconds, Anna just stared at the photo, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it, and her breath caught in her throat. The hallway around them seemed to dissolve into silence. The clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation from the cafe felt like they were coming from another universe. "My twin sister?" she finally whispered, like she was trying to taste the words before believing them. Oliver nodded slowly, gently, his voice thick. "Identical. Her name was Laura. That's her in the photo, with our daughter, Emma." Anna's eyes stayed locked on the picture. I don't remember any of this. I've never seen that woman, but..." She looked up at him. "She looks exactly like me." He didn't say anything. He couldn't. What could you say in a moment like that? He just let her sit with it. Anna leaned against the wall, still staring at the image, as if it might shift or tell her something more. "You're serious," she finally said. "This isn't a joke?" "No," Oliver replied. "I had a DNA test done. The sample came back a near-perfect match to Laura." "You're not just similar, you're genetically the same." Anna closed her eyes for a second and let out a shaky laugh. Not from humor, but from disbelief. "I thought I was just abandoned, dropped off at 5 with no name, no one asking questions. I thought I'd never know where I came from." Her voice broke. "And now you're telling me I had a sister?" "A twin." Oliver nodded. "And she was everything. Kind, funny, stubborn. She would have loved you. I think she would have felt this pull I feel when I look at you, like somehow she's still here through you." Anna slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her elbows resting on her knees, both hands still gripping the photograph. Her eyes were glassy, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she looked lost, like someone who'd just been told the world was round after a lifetime of walking in circles. "I always wondered," she said quietly. "I used to have dreams as a kid, like flashes. A woman's voice, warm hands, the smell of soap. But when I'd tell the carers, they said I was making it up, that it was my imagination." She looked up at him again. "But it wasn't, was it?" Oliver shook his head. "No, I don't think it was." He crouched down beside her, careful not to crowd her. "I know this is a lot, and I don't expect anything from you. I just couldn't keep it from you anymore. You deserve to know." Anna sat in silence for a long time. Her fingers moved absently across the edge of the photo like she was memorizing the faces. "Did she know about me?" she asked finally. "Did Laura know she had a sister?" Oliver hesitated. "I don't think so. She never mentioned it. But her early childhood was fuzzy. She didn't like talking about it. Now I think maybe she didn't know either." That seemed to hit Anna harder than anything. A life missed, a bond broken before it ever had the chance to form. She let out a long breath. "What happens now?" she asked. Oliver paused. "That's up to you. You can take time, ask questions, or walk away if that's what you need. But I want you to know you're not alone anymore. And if you want to meet Emma, I think she'd love you." For the first time, Anna looked hopeful. Fragile, but hopeful. Anna didn't return to work the next day. Oliver stopped by the cafe just to check, and one of the other waiters mentioned she had called in, said she needed a day off for personal reasons. He didn't blame her. If their positions were reversed, he wouldn't have been able to show his face in public either. Everything in her life had just tilted sideways. She needed space, time to breathe, to process. Still, he worried that maybe he had pushed too hard, said too much, opened a door she wasn't ready to walk through. But later that evening, just as he was putting Emma to bed, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hi, it's Anna. Can we meet tomorrow? Somewhere quiet." Oliver responded right away. "Of course, whenever you're ready." She chose the Rose Garden at Preston Park, early in the morning, before the usual joggers and dog walkers filled the paths. Oliver brought coffee, the way Laura used to like it, oat milk, 2 sugars, and waited near the bench where he and Laura had taken one of their last photos together. Anna arrived in a long coat and scarf, hair pulled back, eyes tired but steady. She looked different already, like someone who had wrestled with something all night and come out the other side. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't sleep. I didn't expect you to," Oliver replied. They sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, watching the petals sway in the early breeze. Finally, Anna spoke. "I've never had family, not really. And now I find out I had a sister, a twin, and she's gone." And you? And Emma? Her voice caught again. I don't even know what to feel. Oliver looked at her gently. You don't have to know. You just have to feel what's true for you. And if that changes tomorrow, or next week, that's okay too. They sat like that for nearly an hour. Just talking. No pressure, no dramatic revelations. Just two people trying to piece together something that had been broken long before either of them understood it. Anna asked questions about Laura. What she was like, what she loved, how she laughed. Oliver answered them with care, sometimes smiling, sometimes swallowing emotion too thick to speak through. He told her about Laura's obsession with old typewriters, how she used to sing off-key while making pancakes, and how she once cried during a dog food commercial and blamed it on hormones. He painted her in memories, not myths, and that seemed to matter to Anna. I don't want to turn her into some perfect angel I can't live up to, she said. I just want to know her, even if it's through you. Oliver nodded. She wasn't perfect, but she was good, and she would have wanted this. For you to know her, even if it's in your own time, your own way. Anna looked down at the coffee cup between her hands. And Emma? She asked. Does she know? Not yet, Oliver replied. Only that you looked like her mom. She's a smart girl. She sensed something, but I didn't want to confuse her until you were ready. Anna exhaled slowly, processing that. I think I want to meet her, she said at last. Not today, but soon. I need a bit more time to be someone she can actually meet, not just this confused mess. Oliver smiled. You're already someone worth meeting. And in that moment, there was no need to say more. The park, the roses, the quiet, it all held them in place like a pause between chapters. Not an ending, not a beginning, but something necessary in between. Over the next week, things shifted, not in any dramatic, movie-like way. There were no grand reunions or tears in the rain, but small things happened. Messages exchanged, quiet check-ins, a coffee shared without needing to talk about the heavy stuff. Oliver and Anna began to find a rhythm, tentative and fragile, but real. They weren't family yet, not exactly, not in the way most people would define it, but there was something forming between them, a kind of cautious trust. Oliver didn't push. He answered her questions when she had them. He gave her space when she didn't, and through it all, Emma remained unaware of the storm slowly shifting behind the curtain. She went to school, played with her toys, and asked about the cafe lady now and then. One evening, as they walked home from school, she pointed at a woman across the street and said, "That's not her, is it?" Oliver shook his head and smiled. "No, love, that's someone else." Emma didn't ask more. She didn't need to. Kids seem to understand timing in a way adults often forget, like they know when the truth is ready, and when it still needs to grow a bit more before it can be spoken. Meanwhile, Anna began looking into Laura's life on her own. She asked to see photos, old videos. She wanted to know what she'd missed, what they'd both lost. Sometimes she laughed at how similar they were, the way Laura rolled her eyes, how she stood with one hip out, how she held a wine glass by the stem like it was instinct. "I do that too," she said once, almost whispering, "and I never knew why." It was heartbreaking and beautiful all at once, like watching someone find a language they'd always spoken, but never heard out loud until now. It was a Saturday morning when everything quietly changed. The air was crisp, the sky overcast in that very British way that suggests rain but never commits. Oliver and Anna had agreed to meet at Preston Park again, this time with Emma. There were no big declarations, no plans for a perfect introduction, just a walk, a picnic blanket, some sandwiches. Emma didn't know who Anna really was, not yet, but Oliver had told her they'd be seeing the nice lady from the cafe, and that seemed to be enough. When Anna arrived, she wore a navy jumper and jeans, simple and soft. Her hands were tucked into her pockets, nervous but trying to look relaxed. Emma ran up to her immediately. Charlie clutched in one hand and said, "You're back," like they'd seen each other only yesterday. Anna crouched down, smiled and said, "I missed you." And that was it. No hesitation, no awkwardness. Emma sat beside her on the picnic blanket, showing her how Charlie had a new button sewn onto his belly. Anna listened like it was the most important story in the world. Oliver sat nearby, just watching. There was something surreal about the moment. watching his daughter sit beside a woman who shared her mother's face, her laugh, her gentleness, but it didn't feel eerie. It felt right, natural even. Emma didn't question why Anna's eyes looked like hers. She didn't ask why Anna knew the same silly knock-knock joke Laura used to tell. She just accepted it, the way children do when the energy around them feels safe. Anna caught Oliver's eye at one point and gave him a look that said, "Thank you for not giving up on this." He smiled back, and in that quiet moment, something settled. Not everything was explained, but something was beginning to heal. Over the weeks that followed, Anna gradually became part of their lives, not as some official label like aunt or sister-in-law, but as herself, someone who was always meant to be there, just delayed. She started joining them for weekend lunches, walks by the pier, little moments that weren't planned but somehow felt important. Emma adored her without ever needing to understand the full picture. Children have a way of trusting what feels safe, and Anna felt safe to her. Sometimes she'd hold Anna's hand without thinking, or curl up beside her on the couch and ask her to read a bedtime story, even though Anna admitted she hadn't read a picture book in years. Those were the moments Oliver felt the weight of it most. Watching them together was like watching two halves of a puzzle begin to recognize each other. And while the ache for Laura never really went away, there was something strangely comforting in seeing Anna exist in the same space. It wasn't a replacement. Nothing could ever replace Laura. But it was something new, something that made the loss a little less sharp. Anna never pushed for more than what came naturally. She asked questions about Laura when she was ready, not when she was expected to. She took her time getting to know Emma, never overstepping, and sometimes she'd sit alone with a cup of tea, staring at old photos, her thumb tracing the outline of her sister's face like she was memorizing it. One day she turned to Oliver and said, "I miss so much," and he just nodded. "Me too." There wasn't anything else to say, but there didn't need to be. The important part was that she was here now, and that changed everything. The decision to finally tell Emma came quietly, without ceremony. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, the kind where time slows down and the world feels far away. They were all sitting in the living room, Emma on the floor coloring, Anna reading, Oliver flipping through an old photo album. Emma pointed at a picture of Laura, one Oliver hadn't realized was even in the book. "That's Mummy," she said confidently, then looked at Anna. "You look like her." Oliver glanced at Anna, and she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. He set the book down and sat beside his daughter. "Emma," he said gently, "can I tell you something important?" She looked up, curious but not afraid. "Do you remember when you said Anna looked like Mummy?" She nodded. "That's because she's her sister. Your mummy had a twin." Emma's eyes widened, and for a second the room was silent. Then she looked at Anna, processing. "You're my aunt?" Anna smiled, nervous but warm. "I am. I didn't know until recently. But yes, I'm your aunt." Emma didn't say anything for a long moment. She looked down at her drawing, then up at Anna again. "Can I still call you Anna?" Anna laughed softly, relief blooming in her chest. "Of course you can." Emma nodded seriously, then returned to her coloring as if nothing earth-shattering had just been said. But Oliver knew better. These were the moments where lives turned corners, not with fireworks but with crayons and quiet understanding. And in that moment, he felt something shift, like the universe had finally placed a piece back where it belonged. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't complete, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. As weeks became months, the presence of Anna in their lives started to feel less like a revelation and more like a quiet truth that had always been there, waiting to be rediscovered. There were no more secrets between them. Emma now referred to Anna as her mum's sister when people asked, in that matter-of-fact way kids do, when they've accepted something so fully that they no longer question it. The simplicity of it made Oliver emotional. Sometimes, watching Emma and Anna together, building puzzles, baking cupcakes, watching the same cartoons Laura once loved, felt like witnessing something sacred. Anna wasn't trying to be Laura, and no one expected her to, but she carried pieces of her without even trying. The same gentle way of listening, the same dry sense of humor, even the way she poured cereal into Emma's bowl, like it was a tiny ritual that meant more than she realized. Oliver often caught himself wondering how life might have been if Laura had known. Would she have searched for Anna? Would they have found each other sooner? But those thoughts, while natural, led nowhere. The only thing that mattered now was that they had found each other, and that they were building something honest from the rubble of what had once been missing. One evening after Emma had gone to bed, Anna and Oliver sat in the kitchen sharing a bottle of wine Laura had once loved. They talked about nothing and everything. Anna said, almost offhandedly, "I still don't have many memories from before I was 5, but sometimes when I'm with you two, I feel connected, like I'm remembering something I never lived." Oliver looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "Maybe you are." And neither of them said more. Some things didn't need explaining. It was late spring when they all took a trip to the coast. Not far, just a little seaside town with colorful beach huts, fish and chips, and ice cream that melted too fast in the sun. Emma ran across the sand barefoot, chasing seagulls and laughing until she lost her breath. Anna and Oliver sat on a blanket, watching her, the kind of peaceful silence between them that only comes from people who have endured something deep together. It wasn't romance. It wasn't about filling a void. It was something else entirely. Companionship, understanding, shared grief, and unexpected healing. Anna looked out at the sea and said, "This is what I always wanted." Not answers, necessarily, just a place to belong. Oliver nodded, his eyes following Emma as she tried to build a sandcastle with a plastic cup. "You do belong," he said simply. And she did, in a way that wasn't forced or fragile, in a way that felt like she had always been written into their story, just in invisible ink. That night, as they packed up and headed home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the car window, cheeks pink from the sun. Anna looked at her, then at Oliver, and said, "Do you think Laura knew, deep down?" He thought about it, then answered, "I think maybe part of her did. She always said some things in life don't need to be remembered. They just find their way back when they're needed." Anna smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'm one of those things." He reached for her hand briefly and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You are." And in that moment, under a dusky sky on a quiet road home, everything felt exactly as it should. Time didn't rush them, and that was the gift in all of this. There was no pressure to define what they had become to each other. No need to put it into categories. Life settled into something gentle, steady. Emma now expected Anna to be at Sunday lunch and would even save her the last roast potato out of unspoken loyalty. They developed routines, walks to the farmer's market, board games after dinner, quiet evenings watching old movies Laura had once loved. Sometimes it felt surreal for Oliver, like he was living in an alternate version of his own life, one where loss hadn't erased everything, but instead redrew it in softer lines. He still missed Laura every day. That hadn't changed. Her absence lived in the quiet corners of the house, in the way Emma sometimes said something with Laura's cadence, or in the old cardigan he couldn't bring himself to throw away. But Anna's presence didn't threaten that grief. It honored it. It added to it in the way music does to silence. One evening, as they all watched the rain tap against the windows, Emma asked, "Do you think Mummy knows about us now?" The room fell quiet. Anna looked over at Oliver, unsure if she should answer. Oliver placed a hand on his daughter's back and said, "I think she does. And I think she's happy we're all together." Emma smiled, satisfied with that. Later that night, after she was asleep, Anna said softly, "You didn't hesitate." Oliver raised an eyebrow. When she asked, "You didn't hesitate. You just knew what to say." He thought about that. "I guess I did. I guess when something feels right, your heart speaks faster than your head." Anna nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long time, peace settled between them like a warm blanket. There was a day, almost a year to the one when Oliver and Emma had first stepped into that cafe, when everything came full circle. The three of them had gone back, not out of sentimentality, but because Emma insisted on getting the same chocolate cake she remembered from that strange, blurry afternoon. The staff had changed a bit, but the place still smelled like rosemary and garlic and freshly ground coffee. As they sat at the same table by the window, Oliver couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. That day had broken something open inside of him, something he thought would never heal. And yet here they were. Anna laughed as Emma insisted on ordering for everyone, her voice full of command and confidence. 1 chocolate cake, 2 teas, and a lemonade. "Please," she said to the server, beaming with pride. Anna leaned back, eyes full of something Oliver couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. "This place used to scare me," she admitted, her voice quiet. "It was where everything started, and for a while I wasn't sure I could ever walk through that door again." Oliver nodded. "And now?" She smiled. "Now it feels like a beginning." Emma was too busy wiping icing from her lips to notice the weight of that statement, but Oliver did. And he knew that beginnings often hide in the most ordinary moments. A smile across a cafe, a whispered memory, a child's laugh that echoes just like someone you once loved. The past hadn't vanished. It never would. But it no longer defined them. It had become part of the fabric of who they were. And as Oliver watched the two people who had unknowingly saved each other, he realized that sometimes healing doesn't come in answers. It comes in presence. In the months that followed, Oliver noticed something remarkable. The silence that had once filled his home had changed. It no longer echoed with grief, but with laughter, footsteps, voices. Emma had begun calling Anna Auntie without anyone asking her to. It just happened one day during breakfast when Anna handed her the orange juice and Emma chirped, "Thanks, Auntie Anna." Anna had paused, visibly moved, but said nothing, just smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the same way Laura used to when she felt overwhelmed. Little by little, a new chapter unfolded. One written not in dramatic lines, but in subtle, everyday moments that mattered deeply. School plays, library visits, late-night chats in the kitchen about life, about Laura, about everything that had led them here. Oliver found himself changing too. He was lighter somehow, not healed, not fully, but breathing again. He started reading again, something he hadn't done since Laura's passing. Started cooking new meals, taking long walks, noticing the way the trees changed color. It was as if something frozen inside him had finally started to thaw. He didn't expect it, didn't plan it, but being around Anna gave him permission to live again, without guilt, without comparison. One night, after Emma had gone to sleep, Anna and Oliver stood on the back porch, wrapped in jumpers, drinking tea. The moon was high, casting silver across the damp grass. "Do you think we were meant to find each other?" she asked. Oliver looked at her and said, "I think the universe is messier than we give it credit for. But I also think some people are meant to cross paths, even if it takes a lifetime." Anna didn't reply right away, but she smiled, and in that silence, there was understanding. Emma's birthday arrived in early summer, and this time it felt truly joyful. No undercurrent of sadness, no quiet avoidance of the day, just laughter, color, music, and people who genuinely loved her. Anna helped organize everything: balloons, cupcakes, even a scavenger hunt in the garden. She blended in so naturally that several parents assumed she was Oliver's sister or cousin. One even asked if she was Emma's godmother, and Anna just smiled and said something like that. Emma beamed the entire day, running around barefoot, her cheeks red from excitement. At one point during the party, she pulled Anna aside and whispered, "This is my best birthday ever." Anna crouched down and hugged her, blinking back tears she didn't let fall. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the garden lights twinkled in the soft breeze, the three of them sat together on the grass, full from cake and sleepy with contentment. Emma had her head in Anna's lap, and Oliver leaned back on his elbows, watching the stars come out. No one said much. They didn't need to. Eventually, Emma spoke, her voice quiet. "I'm glad you found us." Anna brushed a hand through her hair. "Me too." And Oliver, sitting beside them, knew that nothing about this was ordinary. The world had taken from him, yes, cruelly, unexpectedly, but it had also given something back, not in replacement, not in symmetry, but in connection, in the way Anna had walked into their lives with a face from the past and a heart all her own, in the way Emma now had someone to call aunt, someone who reminded her of her mum, but never tried to become her. That night, with the stars above them and the quiet wrapped around their small, strange, beautiful family, Oliver knew something rare had happened, something unexplainable, something true. Even now, Oliver can't fully explain it. When people ask, and occasionally they do, how he managed to move forward after Laura's death, he never has a clean answer. Sometimes he says time, Sometimes he says therapy, or Emma, or long walks on cold mornings, but none of those things capture the whole truth. The real answer is Anna. Not because she replaced anything or anyone, she never did, never tried to, but because her arrival cracked something open in him that had been sealed too tightly by grief. She reminded him, simply by being there, that the past doesn't have to vanish in order for the present to matter, that love can take many forms, that healing isn't a straight line. It loops, repeats, surprises you when you're looking the other way. They don't talk about Laura every day, but she's always there. In Emma's laugh, in Anna's side glance when something is funny, but she doesn't want to admit it. In the way they all pause when her favorite song comes on the radio. Oliver doesn't pretend it all makes sense. He doesn't try to package it into a lesson or a moral. Life gave him an impossible story, a twist no one would believe if it weren't unfolding in real time. But it also gave him the grace to live through it, and maybe that's enough. Sometimes he lies awake at night and wonders how things would have been different if Laura had lived long enough to meet Anna. Would they have known? Would they have found each other? But the wondering never turns to regret, just a soft kind of wondering. The kind that makes you close your eyes and whisper a thank you into the dark, not for the loss, but for what was found in the wake of it. He told this story once, in a quiet corner of the internet, on a forum where people shared the things they didn't know how to explain. It didn't get thousands of likes. It wasn't turned into a podcast or optioned for a film, but it resonated. People messaged him, not to ask if it was real, but to say they believed it was, that they needed it to be. And maybe that's why he wrote it in the first place. Not to convince anyone, but to remind himself that some things happen outside of reason, that sometimes the unlikeliest people arrive when you've stopped expecting anything to change. He doesn't post often anymore. Life is busy and peaceful and mostly unremarkable in the best way. But now and then, when he's sitting at the park watching Emma chase butterflies or listening to Anna hum a song from her childhood she still doesn't quite remember, he thinks about that day in the cafe, how Emma tugged his sleeve and said the one thing that changed everything. "Daddy, that lady looks like Mummy." How a chance encounter, or maybe not so chance, set in motion a story he still doesn't fully understand. A story about loss, yes, but more than that, a story about what's left behind, about what returns, about how sometimes, when we're not looking, the universe brings us back a piece of what we thought was gone, in the form of a stranger, a smile, a second chance. And even now, after all of it, that still takes his breath away.